Joining us now, State Senator, Republican Jill Vogel. Senator, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you. Good morning. Thank you for the compliment. That was a nice thing to say. I'm glad you count me as a good one.
I think it's even money right now. Now, there's three people, just to give everybody a quick background here. There's three announced candidates running for lieutenant governor. Senator Jill Vogel from Northern Virginia, Senator Bryce Reeves from the Stafford County area, House of Delegates member Glenn Davis from Virginia Beach. Now, there's a lot more that we expect to get in, probably about five others that haven't announced. We can go down the names, but I'm not.
Five more?
Oh, yeah, Shaq
Thank
Hill.
God you're a savant and you're know all this.
Yeah, Shaq Hill's getting in. Micah Edmonds is getting in. There's a of Goochland, can't think of his name offhand. He's getting in, and there'll be several others. So we think when it's all said and done, there's going to be 8 candidates. But I've got Jill Vogel right now, even money. 8?
Good
yes.
grief. And by the way, can I say that I will graciously accept the moniker of being from Northern Virginia, but I will say I represent the Piedmont and the Northern Shenandoah Valley, and all my people out in the rural parts of Virginia don't really necessarily think of themselves as Northern Virginia. So I just have to put that plug in for all the beautiful rural parts of my district that are not in Northern Virginia.
Okay, we'll say Jill Vogel from the Valley.
And I'm from beautiful Shenandoah County, Virginia, born and raised.
God's country.
I put that little plug in for the Valley.
Good plug.
We love the Valley.
Vogel for the Valley. Okay, now, Senator, let's get to the landmark decision yesterday by the Supreme Court, 8-0, as we predicted on our show yesterday, by the way, 8-zip.
Amazing. You're psychic. You know everything. You know 8 people are getting in, and you knew the Supreme Court was going to be 8-zip.
It's the
I should call you every morning.
You should, because
before I start the day.
Absolutely.
And not make any decisions before I talk to you.
That's what I would do if I were you.
I know.
I mean, look, if you want to win, I tell it to you straight, right? Because we're trucking the truth of my political predictions since I got on the air, like 97%.
And you're going to have Steve Albertson on later, who's going to make all the predictions about State Central. So if between you every morning and listening on the radio, then I guess I would never make a mistake.
You would bet almost 1,000.
Right.
That's all you have to do.
Okay.
See, it's so easy. See, you get it. That's why I have you as odds-on favorite to win, right?
The problem is I work all day long, and doing my Senate job and my constituent service job. I don't have time to, prognosticate. So I should just call, get all the answers, and then really there'd be no way to. It'd be true perfection.
Just mail it in.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, go ahead. So tell me what else I need to know. Tell me what else I don't know.
Well, let's start with Bob McDonnell, exonerated yesterday, 8-0. I know that's a relief to him. You're a lawyer. What did you make of this whole thing?
Unbelievable relief. Well, this is something, I think you know this, but your listeners may not, and that is that I am actually an ethics lawyer. It's what I do for a living, and I have built a law practice all around the country advising people on just these kinds of issues. And I do charities work as well and other nonprofit kind of work, but generally speaking, telling people in all 50 states as well as under the federal law what the ethical standards are. And in this case, the fundamental issue here was that it was such an amorphous standard. This this notion that you could be prosecuted under a denial of honest services standard, under this notion that if you accept something and then provide some goodwill back, then you're suddenly subject to prosecution. Across the country, and obviously across the Commonwealth, you have Republicans and Democrats signing on in opposition to say, wait a minute, if this becomes a standard, then you can prosecute virtually anybody. And that was what the Supreme Court understood that. And so, while, I would argue that, as many people would say, some of this seemed very distasteful and unfortunate, and maybe, to an average person sounded in many ways terrible. This was not the kind of thing that the Supreme Court, and certainly a practitioner, would say is something you should be prosecuted for. Because regular people in elected office, certainly engage with the public in ways where there's goodwill, there's kindness is shared. I will tell you, though, that one of the things that I have advocated and will continue to advocate for as somebody running for lieutenant governor in Virginia is we should just go ahead and accept a gift ban, period. That's what we've done in Congress. We've passed TOLOGA at the federal level. Gifts are banned. I think that would take all of the ambiguity out of the discussion. It restore people's confidence in dignity and what they believe it should be the conduct of their elected office holders, and that would take all this off the table. And suddenly there wouldn't be any subject of discussion about, should you or shouldn't you, and was that a legitimate gift or was it not? Let's just take it out of the discussion. Elected office holders, in my view, especially those who are serving in the legislature, should be there to do the people's work. You can certainly engage with those in the lobbying community who wish to influence the outcome, in and around votes and perhaps in and around the issues environment around elections. But, let's do the work, let's engage, but let's just let's just ban the gifts altogether. You don't need to take the trips, you don't need to engage in all that, and that would fundamentally change people's view and make them less suspicious, and I think restore people's confidence in what it is they believe their citizen legislator should be doing when they're there doing the people's work in Richmond.
So,
we
Senator,
are still fundamentally, as our founding fathers envisioned, a citizen legislature in Virginia. We're not year-round elected bureaucrats.
Right.
We're not paid year-round. You're supposed to leave home. I have a job. I have a family. I'm a regular person. I'm supposed to go to Richmond for the time, in the early winter, go there for 6 or 8 weeks, work hard, pass the laws that, my constituents asked me to pass, and then go home and live under those laws like a regular person. I'm not there to, live wildly, have fancy dinners and take fancy trips and take gifts, period, end of story. I never have. I don't take gifts, and it's never been an issue for me. And if everybody would live that way, then we wouldn't have an issue. So I think that the discussion is twofold. One, that Bob McDonnell being exonerated was the right legal answer, period. And such a relief for him and for his family who have been put through, obviously, what has been a living hell for them.
Yes.
And that is an overwhelming relief that it's over, but it speaks to a larger issue that we have to solve in Virginia, and that is that we have this very ambiguous, I think, sort of legal framework that we've set up in our ethics. Other states are more clear, and I think we should just say, boom, we ban gifts and we're done.
Well, certainly Senator Vogel would bring clarity. If you simply banned all gifts of any kind all the time, it would end all this stuff because you just wouldn't accept it.
Right.
And it might take a few months for people to adjust to that. But then, and there's senators now and members of the House that behave that way, yourself included, that simply take nothing, no dinners, no lunches, nothing, is 100% zero.
And
so they seem
anything.
to get by.
It doesn't change any of the work that I do. It never has.
Right.
And no one's ever said, let me take you on a fancy trip. Let me send you fancy presents. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
And yet, unfortunately, in the mind of the public, there's this inherent suspicion that that's the way some people work. And in fact, unfortunately, there are some people in Virginia who've gone to prison for the exchange of gifts of value for certain votes, or at least the perception of such votes, or the perception of doling out money on the finance committee or something like that, and that's horrible. So let's just be done with it. Take all the ambiguity out of it, and it's over.
Well, I think a ban would do that. You hit the nail on the head. I'm 100% for that. Let's get.
And nobody even understands what our rules are now. Members don't understand it. The regulated community does not understand it. And as a practitioner who gets on the phone and often does big, we'll get on, for example, people will dial in, and I'll go on, a conference call, for example, and people will call in and say, what are the rules in X and such state? The idea behind a good regulatory framework that everybody understands is just that, a good regulatory framework that is 100% clear, so everybody knows exactly what the rules are, and the idea is to have ethical standards. And, everybody should put ethics above all else. We should hold ourselves out as highly ethical rulemakers, and that we engage with the public and with those who engage us as lobbyists, in the most ethical way possible, period.
So, Senator, no baseball tickets, no Super Bowl tickets, no junkets to NASCAR, none of this, all gone.
I mean, I know that for a long time that was the tradition, and for folks who served there far, far longer than I, they may be disappointed because that was, the norm, and I know they don't see that there's any corruption or any inherently corrupting, value in that. But honestly, no one gives me tickets. I don't go anywhere. I don't go to any games. Part of the problem is I have a job and I have a family, and I have to come home at the end of session and, work and take my kids to school and to sport events. But I can see other people who have time and have the opportunity can engage more in that kind of social activity. But at the end of the day, what does it really do? What does it really get you? And if you get in trouble, was it ever worth it?
Right.
At what cost?
Doesn't make any
sense. If the perception is that somehow, especially when they look at your report, if the perception is that you're out there on this wild junket all the time and engaged in all this, socializing at somebody else's expense, I just think it reflects badly, and fundamentally it creates an environment where you have a lot of legal exposure. And so for the members themselves, in the end, while they might be some short-term disappointment or some objections in the short term, I promise you and them that it would save everybody in the end and save people from themselves, because people unwittingly step in it not meaning to.
Look, I think that would solve a lot of this. Senator, you're a lawyer, so this indictment of Bob McDonnell has been vacated by the Supreme Court. Now, what about Maureen McDonnell? Does that go with it, or is that separate?
I mean, it should go with it eventually. It's obviously a totally different case, but her lawyer's position is going to be, obviously, it's the same issue.
Right.
The indictment was brought under the same legal theory. So I would assume that,
To the other Supreme Court decision yesterday regarding limiting the abortions in Texas, that went down, basically saying the state of Texas doesn't have that right. There were similar things that were attempted to pass in Virginia. Is that going to change the state Senate's position now on some of this legislation?
Yes. I think, Virginia had passed a similar law, and that's going to be an issue in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and very, very unfortunate, because what it does is diminish the Commonwealth's right to, assist in supporting and regulating women's health and protecting women's health, because that's fundamentally what that was about, and why you would carve out, because somehow you have this, politically it's such a, the third rail to engage in any discussion about abortion, that then you create this environment where women are, again, have all this exposure, outside of going to a regular ambulatory surgical center or a regular hospital setting, go to an abortion clinic and suddenly, oh, wait a minute, now you're in a whole different environment and you have all this risk. Why would you ever do that?
Right.
And I understand that it's politically charged, and, there's this position that, we're somehow impinging on a woman's right. You're not. It's a women's health issue. It has nothing to do with this other issue of your abortion. And so I think that, unfortunately, there's all kinds of mismessaging and mixed signals there, but it fundamentally comes down to protecting women's health. That's my view of that, 100%.
So your position is this was strictly to do about protecting women in a safe environment rather than restricting the access to abortions.
Yeah, it's the idea is that you're regulating the clinic, the safety standards in the clinic, and making them consistent with those of any other ambulatory surgical center, because you're performing a surgical procedure.
Okay, Senator Vogel, I got 2 minutes. You're running for lieutenant governor. We think it's going to be a convention in May. It might be a primary. My bet is you're going to have a convention in Charlottesville, about 15,000 people there. How does Jill Vogel win this race?
Jill Vogel wins this race by going out and organizing the best grassroots campaign anybody's ever seen in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that's exactly what we've been doing. We've been working for a convention, planning for one since we started. We've been doing this. We really got off the ground at the end of the Senate session. Mid-March, by April 1, we had our team in place. And really it's been, since April the 1st, going full tilt all across the Commonwealth of Virginia and going around the state and signing up delegates. That has been our goal. That's been our game plan. Now, there's obviously this later subject where you're going to have Steve Albertson on. He's going to come talk later about, is this plan going to change? Is this plan going to shift? Is State Central going to change their view of all that? Until that changes, this is still my plan. And my goal is to, build a coalition of people all across Virginia that have a common view of what needs to happen in Virginia, and that is we are desperate for new leadership. And leadership that reflects what real Virginians desperately want and need, and that is government that's reactive to them, that's accountable, that will defend our liberty, that will defend our First Amendment rights, that will defend the Constitution, a strong leadership in the Senate that supports a strong executive, and that will defend and fight for our Second Amendment rights and for life and for all the things that we care about. And I think voters in Virginia feel ignored. I mean, listen to what's been happening in Virginia. Look what happened in our primary. Look at what's happening. I mean, it's reflective of what's happening, frankly, around the world. Mm-hmm. And so I am very eager to put together a coalition of people who want to govern Virginia well, who will put principle over party. I'm not engaged in fighting with this party over process or trying to throw my weight around and influence anybody in any way. I am moving ahead. I will do whatever the party, decides. But at this point in the process, I've been working for a convention and planning for one because that's what they decided. And until somebody tells me otherwise, that's what we're doing.
All right. Sounds like a good strategy to me. I've got you as even money with Reeves to win this, and I've got Glenn Davis 3.5 to 1. Go to vogelforvirginia.com. That's vogelforvirginia.com for more information. I want to thank State Senator Jill Vogel, candidate for Lieutenant Governor, for being with us